Most people remember exactly where they were when fear turned into something else entirely. Sarah Collins would never forget the moment three strangers stepped out of the shadows behind her on a rain-slicked Friday night in Bakersfield, their footsteps too deliberate, too synchronized, too close. What she couldn't have known, what none of them could have known, was that 40 members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club were parked less than 50 yards away, engines still warm, and one of them had just glanced down the alley at precisely the wrong moment. Or perhaps, for Sarah, exactly the right one. The night had started ordinary enough. Sarah left the county courthouse just after 7, her paralegal badge still clipped to her jacket, her mind replaying the deposition she'd spent all afternoon transcribing. The case involved testimony against a local trafficking ring, dangerous people with long reach, and she'd been warned more than once to watch her surroundings. But warnings have a way of feeling distant when you're tired and your car is parked 3 blocks away and all you want is to get home. The rain had picked up by the time she crossed 3rd Street, turning the pavement slick and reflective under the yellow glow of streetlights. Most of the shops were closed. The sidewalks empty. She pulled her coat tighter and walked faster, heels clicking against wet concrete. She noticed them at the corner of Elm and 5th. 3 men leaning against a parked sedan, watching her pass. Not unusual in itself. Bakersfield had its share of loiterers, but something in their posture made her stomach tighten. The way they straightened when she walked by, the way one of them murmured something to the others. Sarah kept walking, forcing herself not to look back. Her car was just ahead, parked beneath a broken streetlight she'd been meaning to report. She fumbled for her keys, fingers cold and clumsy. That's when she heard the footsteps behind her. Faster now. Closer. She glanced over her shoulder. All 3 men were following her, no longer pretending otherwise. The closest one, tall, wearing a dark jacket, smiled when their eyes met. Not a friendly smile. Sarah's pulse hammered. She considered running, but her heels were too high and the pavement too slick. Instead, she veered sharply to the right, cutting through a narrow alley between 2 brick buildings. A shortcut she'd used before. It led to a busier street, one with lights and people and safety. Except tonight the alley felt longer. Darker. Behind her, the footsteps quickened. No pretense now. One of them called out, voice low and mocking. "Hey, where you going? We just want to talk." Sarah's breathing came faster. She gripped her keys between her fingers the way self-defense videos always suggested, though she had no idea if it would actually help. The far end of the alley was maybe 30 yards ahead, but it felt like miles. "Come on, don't be like that. Closer now." She could hear their boots splashing through puddles. She broke into a stumbling run, heel catching on uneven pavement. She barely kept her balance. And then she heard something else. Deeper. Mechanical. A low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the brick walls on either side of the alley. Motorcycles. Lots of them. Sarah burst out of the alley onto a side street and nearly collided with a row of parked bikes. Harleys, lined up tight along the curb, chrome flashing under a buzzing streetlight. 40 of them, maybe more. And standing beside them, leather vests gleaming with the unmistakable red and white patch of the Hells Angels, were the riders. They'd stopped at a dive bar 2 blocks over after a long ride up from Fresno. Most were still outside, smoking, talking, stretching road-stiff legs. The kind of presence that made most people cross the street. But Sarah didn't cross the street. She ran straight toward them, gasping, her eyes wide with panic. The nearest biker, a man called Reaper, 6'4" with a graying beard and arms like tree trunks, turned at the sound of her footsteps. His hand instinctively moved to his belt. Then he saw her face. Behind her, the 3 men emerged from the alley. They slowed immediately when they saw the motorcycles, saw the vests, saw 40 sets of eyes turning toward them. Sarah stopped just short of Reaper, breathing hard. "They're following me," she managed. Reaper's expression didn't change. He simply looked past her toward the 3 men, who had frozen at the mouth of the alley like predators suddenly realizing they'd walked into the wrong territory. Then Reaper did something Sarah didn't expect. He smiled. Slow and cold. "That right?" he said quietly. Around him, the other bikers began to move. Not rushing, not shouting, just shifting, stepping forward, forming a wall of leather and muscle between Sarah and the alley. One of the 3 men raised his hand slightly, backing up a step. "Hey, man, this isn't." "Yeah, Reaper interrupted, his voice calm as stone. It is. The rain kept falling, softer now, as if the night itself had paused to watch what happened next. Sarah stood behind Reaper, her back pressed against the cold chrome of a parked Harley, her breath still coming in short gasps while 40 bikers formed a silent barrier between her and the 3 men who had chased her out of the alley. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. The tallest of the 3 men, the one who had smiled at her earlier, tried to recover his composure. Look, there's been a misunderstanding. We were just what? Reaper's voice cut through the air like a blade. Just following a woman down a dark alley at night. The man shifted his weight, glancing toward his companions. They looked less confident now. One of them took another step backward. We weren't gonna do anything, the tall one insisted, forcing a weak laugh. We were just messing around. A biker named Chains, standing to Reaper's left, spat onto the wet pavement. Messing around, he repeated flatly. That's what we're calling it now. Around them, more riders moved closer. Not threatening yet, but the message was clear. The 3 men were surrounded, not by bars or walls, but by something far more immediate. 40 people who had decided, without a word spoken, that this situation wasn't ending the way the men had planned. Sarah's hands were still shaking. She gripped the edge of the motorcycle seat beside her, trying to steady herself. One of the female riders, a woman with short black hair and a scarred leather jacket, stepped closer and quietly asked if Sarah was hurt. Sarah shook her head. They didn't touch me. I ran. The woman nodded. Smart. Across the street, a bar door swung open and a few more patrons stepped out, curious about the commotion. A couple of them pulled out phones, filming. Someone shouted something about calling the cops. Reaper heard it and nodded slightly without turning around. Good, he said. Let them come. The tall man's bravado cracked further. This is harassment, man. We didn't do anything illegal. Reaper took one slow step forward. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. You followed her. Chased her. Cornered her. Each sentence landed like a stone. Now you're gonna stand here and wait for the cops to sort it out. We don't have to. Yeah, Reaper interrupted again, his tone colder now. You do. Another biker, younger but built like a wall, crossed his arms. Unless you'd rather explain it to us first. The 3 men exchanged glances. The bravado was gone now, replaced by the slow realization that they'd made a serious miscalculation. One of them muttered something under his breath and pulled out a phone, but Chain stepped forward and shook his head. Nah, phone stays in your pocket till the badges get here. Minutes crawled by. The rain tapered off completely, leaving only the sound of distant traffic and the low idle of a single motorcycle engine someone had left running. Sarah's breathing finally steadied. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by exhaustion and a strange, surreal disbelief at what had just happened. The woman biker stayed beside her. You work around here? Sarah nodded. Paralegal. At the courthouse. Long hours. Yeah. The woman glanced toward the 3 men, then back at Sarah. You got someone you can call. Someone to drive you home. Sarah hadn't thought that far ahead. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and nodded. My sister. She's 10 minutes away. Good. Stay with us till she gets here. Sarah wanted to say thank you, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she just nodded. The sound of sirens finally broke through the quiet. 2 patrol cars rolled up, lights flashing, and a pair of officers stepped out cautiously. They took in the scene. The motorcycles, the bikers, the 3 nervous men standing in the middle of it all, and approached slowly. Reaper turned toward them, hands visible, posture relaxed but firm. Evening, officers. The lead cop, a middle-aged man with graying temples, frowned slightly. We got a call about a disturbance. Reaper gestured toward Sarah. Lady was being followed. 3 men chased her into an alley. We made sure she stayed safe till you got here. The officer's gaze shifted to Sarah. Ma'am, is that accurate? Sarah stepped forward, her voice steadier now. Yes. They followed me from 3rd Street. I ran through the alley, and they were right behind me. She pointed toward the 3 men. He called out to me, told me not to run. The tall man tried to speak, but the officer raised a hand. I'll get to you. The second officer was already separating the 3 men, taking statements. One of them was sweating despite the cool air. Another kept glancing toward the line of motorcycles, as if calculating whether he could still run. The lead officer turned back to Reaper. You didn't touch them? Didn't need to, Reaper said simply. just made sure they stayed put. The officer studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Appreciate that. Sarah's phone buzzed. Her sister. 2 minutes away. By the time Sarah's sister arrived, the scene had shifted from tense standoff to something closer to routine police procedure. The three men were separated near the patrol cars, giving statements that didn't quite match, their earlier confidence replaced by the uncomfortable realization that their night had gone very badly. One of them was already in handcuffs after the officer ran his name and found an outstanding warrant. The other two weren't far behind. Sarah stood beside her sister's car now, wrapped in a blanket someone had pulled from a saddlebag, watching as the situation she'd barely escaped slowly unraveled under flashing blue lights. Her sister, Amy, younger by 3 years and fiercely protective, kept one arm around Sarah's shoulders while glaring daggers at the men being questioned. You should have called me sooner, Amy muttered. I would have picked you up. I didn't think, Sarah's voice faltered. I've walked to my car 100 times. Not anymore, Amy said firmly. Not alone. Across the street, Reaper was finishing his statement with the lead officer. The conversation was calm, professional. No raised voices. No accusations. Just facts. When the officer finally closed his notebook and shook Reaper's hand, Sarah saw something she didn't expect. Respect. Not fear. Not suspicion. Just one person acknowledging another for doing the right thing. Reaper walked back toward the line of motorcycles where the other riders were starting to remount their bikes. The night was late, and most of them still had miles to ride before reaching home. But before he could swing a leg over his Harley, Sarah stepped away from her sister's car and crossed the street toward him. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah wasn't sure what to say. Thank you felt too small for what had just happened. You saved my life felt too dramatic, even though it might have been true. Finally, she just said, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here. Reaper shook his head slightly. You ran. That's what mattered. You didn't freeze. I ran toward 40 strangers wearing Hell's Angels vests, Sarah said, a faint, exhausted smile breaking through. My self-preservation instincts might need work. One of the nearby bikers chuckled. Reaper's expression softened. Instincts were fine. You ran toward people. That's smart. Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you. All of you. She looked around at the riders still lingering. I know you didn't have to. Yeah, Reaper interrupted gently. We did. Sheen stepped forward, fishing something out of his vest pocket. A business card, worn at the edges. He handed it to Sarah. Club contact. You ever need anything, you call that number. Someone will answer. Sarah took the card, staring at it. I don't know what to say. Don't gotta say anything, Chains replied. Just stay safe. The woman biker who'd stayed beside Sarah earlier gave her a brief nod before pulling on her helmet. Get home. Get some rest. And maybe park closer next time. Sarah managed a real smile at that. I will. One by one, the engines roared to life. The deep, familiar rumble that had first drawn Sarah out of the alley now filled the street again. But this time it didn't feel threatening. It felt like protection. Like a promise kept. Reaper was the last to start his bike. Before he did, he looked at Sarah one more time. Those guys tonight. They're not gonna bother you again. Cops have their names. Cameras caught their faces. And they know we saw what they did. Sarah nodded, feeling something tight in her chest finally start to loosen. But you be careful anyway, Reaper added. World's got more than 3 bad guys in it. I know, Sarah said quietly. But it's got people like you in it, too. Reaper didn't respond to that. He just pulled on his helmet, kicked the engine over, and rolled forward into the line of departing bikes. Within minutes, the street was empty again except for Sarah, her sister, and the distant glow of taillights disappearing into the Bakersfield night. Amy walked over and gently guided Sarah back toward the car. Come on, let's get you home. Sarah slid into the passenger seat, still clutching the business card Chains had given her. As Amy started the engine and pulled away from the curb, Sarah glanced back one last time at the now empty street, where 40 strangers had formed a wall between her and the worst night of her life. She'd walked into that alley alone, terrified, certain she was out of options. She'd walked out surrounded by people who didn't know her name, but refused to let her face that fear by herself. 2 weeks later, Sarah moved her parking spot to a lit garage 3 blocks closer to the courthouse. She started carrying pepper spray. She texted Amy every night when she left work. But she also kept the business card in her wallet, tucked behind her ID, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected people show up exactly when you need them most. And on the rare nights when she passed a group of bikers at a gas station or saw a Hells Angels vest in a diner, she didn't look away anymore. She nodded. And almost always, they nodded back.